A point that has been made, a point that echoes what I think something that came from Alexander, that came from Hannah, that came from Julia, and that also relates to the social struggles that John talked about. There is no amount of coercion. There's no amount of coercion that can completely replace consent in a democracy. So here I'm paraphrasing words from Alexander's article. And this resonates with me. And it's one of the reasons for which a neoliberal governance extraniated from the people is not a governance that can easily fight a war. However, and this is where my question comes in and what I would like to discuss if you're interested in. However, we can see an authoritarian dictatorship like Russia, in which such consent apparently can be fabricated, or its need can be sidelined by the use of authoritarian methods, which then brings me to what I guess is one of the main concerns of the European resistant opposing left, which is the idea that the organization of such resistance, the creation of a military infrastructure to further support Ukraine, etc., would actually bring us in an authoritarian direction. And I would like to know, in particular, as Ukrainians that are actually fighting this fight, how is this aspect mediated? How is this aspect dealt with and talked about?
So it's a question for?
Well, collectively, it's mostly for Anna and Alexander, and given that that eventually it brings into public participation into state affairs, which now we are talking about in the aspect of war, but it also has something to do with union fights. I would also like to hear from John eventually. But yeah, first, if you want to expand on this, I'd like to know more.
I can say a few words, but you asked a very different difficult question that I mean it goes straight into one of the most complicated questions for philosophy and political sciences and political theory actually. Um, so yes, as you uh, we can say that in our societies, and it's a very good thing in modern European societies. There is our social cohesion is based on the idea that actually the state exists to protect us as citizens and not to sacrifice us in a war of elites for some imperial expansionist ambitions. And also, we need to actually understand that the authoritarian regimes, especially like authoritarian regimes that is very where there is a huge inequality, social inequality, they view human life as a resource to be used to pursue geopolitical goals. And they also have many advantages, let's say, over the democratic systems. They have centralized control over the media, they have repression, so they can wage wars without a regard for public opinion. And it is not the case in democracy. So in this sense, when you enter the logic of defense also, uh, it is right to say that it can lead to a situation where when you are confronted with with a threat, with a regime that respect no rules and which build its power on repression, um, you can enter the same logic in order to be able to be on the same level of social cohesion. But also, what history tells us is this authoritarian, repressive social cohesion doesn't last a long time. And also, in the times of war, many of people that are sent to war by authoritarian regimes, they have no idea what they are fighting for. And in this sense, we can say that also democratic regimes have their own advantages because in these countries, people know what they are actually fighting for. But I think one of the huge challenges is when you are confronted with the enemy that can use the tools of democracy to undermine the democracy. There is a huge risk actually to do the same. So in this sense, we can say that we must rethink how to build the trust among our societies, how to build a line of cohesion and of unity without uh, repeating the recipes of the 90s and 20th century that we all know that lead to social collapse. Sorry for being a little bit erratic in this answer, but I think Alexander have a better answer than me.
Not obligatory, but well, there are of course differences when it comes to democratic or more democratic regimes and more authoritarians. But I wouldn't say that Russia particularly succeeds in fostering this cohesion organically, mechanically perhaps, but even they see the way they conduct the war, they're basically using impoverished population. They're buying people's consent to send them to fight because it becomes economically rational for them. They are so much impoverished. So even send some of your male relatives to die, well, you will make way more money if your relative dies than you will be able in whole your life. This is the situation in Russia. And you can see a lot of people who fight in the Russian army, they're not motivated by like fighting fascism or whatever the propaganda says. They're seen as their only chance in life to cover mortgage payments or pay off debts. And like the question is how motivated they are actually to fight and risk in this situation. And we see that is hesitant about actually mobilizing population. They're trying to recruit as much as possible. So there is a limitation. And what we see with the situation in the Kursk Oblast, that they have to invite some mercenaries from the North Korea. So it doesn't really work well. But I mean, like you can see that, of course, but even in the Ukrainian example, you can see that, of course, there are many expectations or duties from the citizens. Yes, but you can't force people to do things. I mean, you can force them, but what the outcome will be in this situation? Because we're not fighting wars as we were fighting wars 100 years ago or even 70 years ago. All this equipment that you use requires some kind of qualified work in a way. If you're not motivated, if you're forced, will you use it properly or not? Will you just run away and leave it behind, all this expensive equipment? Probably won't. And the same is the main problem with the Ukrainian army, because government is relying so much on this mechanic cohesion, because everyone in Ukraine has the duty to defend, like at least all male citizens. But you can see that, well, the people don't. Even like starting from the training grounds, they refuse to study because they don't want to be on the front line. when they are on the front line, they are not reliable. And like even all these units, this huge shortage of stuff, of soldiers, they say we do not trust these people because they can run away and they can cause death of other people. It all underlines that you can't just enforce this cohesion, enforce this solidarity mechanically. And it makes even authoritarian states or authoritarian approach vulnerable in a way. And of course, we must underline especially this aspect because it is crucial now. Otherwise, just having strong, resilient state, prepared people, infrastructure, well, Germany had this all during the fascist rule. It didn't create any prosperity or happiness. So democratic aspect is extremely important. It gives us a pressure point, and it gives us leverage as well. That doesn't make, I mean, of course, the governments, your government or our government, they would be pressured by both because on the one side, trying to force people, you get this reaction of tacit sabotage. On the other hand, it doesn't make you look good as well. So you lose an external legitimacy. For example, maybe Ukrainian government wanted to just get all the refugees and send them to fight. But first of all, it will lead to extreme changes in the administrative system in your countries, but it won't help. And it would destroy the credibility of the Ukrainian state because that they are forced to do this. But yeah, just some thoughts on the topic.
Thank you. I guess so to add to that and follow up to that, and I'd like John's idea on the topic as well. So to really make a condensation, a big summary of a lot of things that have been said, bottom-up organization and participation, it's a necessity both to resist a neoliberal state, it's one of the failure of neoliberal states, and to resist a war of invasion. And one thing that I wonder about is because we know, and this is something that I think Julia said, that these struggles cannot, that at a certain point, these are local issues that cannot just stay local. We create networks of help and of resistance that are based on territories, but that somewhat that for a prolonged resistance, for a growth, need to surpass national borders, which is part of what we would like to try to foster. And I'd like your opinion about this kind of process, and in this case also John's opinion, as he went through a series of social struggles all over the world in different manners.
So, do we have another hour and a half to discuss that question?
Unfortunately not, but
I'm being a little bit facetious here, but I mean, there's so many aspects to what you're raising, and of course, I mean, it's a cliche. That's a cliche because it's true that, we have a world that's more globalized today than at any time in the past. And I mean, in part, that's the globalization of capitalism. And when you have just really what is the number one most pressing issue on not just on the human species, but on all life on Earth, is climate disruption. And that is a global issue if there ever was one. But of course, it starts at the local level, with this factory or whatever polluting the environment. So want to make one point about resistance and repression, because I think that in general, capitalists much prefer to rule through bourgeois democracy. Because what we see, I mean, you saw it in Russia, what we see developing in the United States is completely arbitrary and corrupt method of rule through Trump. So the capitalists don't know and even the major capitalist journalists today are commenting on this, that they don't know from one day to the next what are going to be the rules of the game, which means they don't know how to invest, where to invest, and also it's just a matter of who gives the most and the biggest bribes to who in the presidency. And so the rise of authoritarianism, you know, is a weak point for the capitalists themselves. But also I want to just stress that issue that I think largely gets lost, you know, of the central role of the working class, because that's really the question of the hour here. And I think that what I'm hearing about the neoliberal policies in Ukraine, or what you see about what's happened in Syria, or here in the United States, that we have to find a way to bring that forward and to emphasize that. And in all the crises that we face, whether it's the issue of repression or the environment or women's rights and so on, rights of LGBTQ people, racism, and so on, that these are tasks for the working class to resolve. And we can only resolve it through our own independent organizations. So I don't know if that really answers your question, you know, well, but it's the best that I can do.
Thank you. And it goes in that direction. I think we are also trying to nobody just thinks we are going to find answers today. I have to so I go back to that in a second. I have to say two things. First of all, Anna must go, and thank you so much for participating. I will try to bring up, and I'm sure Alexander can do the same better than me, actually, but I'll try to bring up some of the things you said and of the work you've done. And thank you for participating. I hope this is just the first time.
Thank you very much. And thanks again, you know, for the event and also for all that you're doing beside this, and keeping the solidarity constant, you know, for 3 years. It's already a big thing. So thanks a lot. And yes, I hope we will collaborate in the future. And also think I was very happy to see John, and it's been a long time that we haven't seen each other. I'm really happy to hear your words and to hear your analysis. And have a nice day.
Yeah.
You too.
Thank you for organizing this. And I look forward to seeing you in Italy or somewhere else.
No, but we are not closing the discussion. It was Anna that needed to go now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. No, we can go on a bit more. Now I have to say a thing in Italian. So now we should have some questions from the audience. I'm also sending around the new YouTube link. Pappo, do you want to convey the question? Puoi andare.
La prima domanda, io mi rivolgo in particolare ad Alexander come un compagno che milita in Social Network, quindi come dire, partecipa a un'attività concreta di un soggetto politico della sinistra ucraina.
So first, the first question is in particular for Alexander as an activist that participate in an actual practical example of socialist activism in Ukraine.
La domanda è questa. di fronte a un possibile accordo Trump-Putin sulla spartizione dell'Ucraina e non una pace giusta, ma un riconoscimento di ciò che l'occupante russo ha conquistato, quali potrebbero essere le reazioni della società ucraina, quali sono già oggi le reazioni nella società ucraina, e la seconda domanda collegata a questa, se ritiene che ci sia uno spazio crescente per una sinistra ucraina, diciamo, che assuma questo ruolo nella battaglia per l'indipendenza dell'Ucraina, partecipando alla difesa dell'Ucraina, e se non vede anche in questo scenario il rischio di una crescita di un'opposizione di destra a Zelensky a fronte di una prospettiva di sconfitta militare.
Okay, grazie. Okay, so these are, as you mentioned, two questions. So in the perspective of this Trump-Putin convergence, and the possibility of Ukraine being forced into a phony peace, into a loss of territory, into a loss of autonomy. What are the that you care to talk about? But what are the reaction you care to talk about from the Ukrainian civil society? What are the perspectives of this reaction, of this assumed discontent, and finally, whether there is a risk, and how is this risk, for this kind of phony solution empowering Ukrainian right wing?
That's all? Or?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they are. It's hard to imagine what the conditions will be, of course. That's not only particular for the right wing. It will generate the reaction from everyone, because from the veterans in particular, for them relatives, because you can see how much it all costs and what it ends up with. Of course, that's a huge problem. It's also a problem of insecurity in Ukraine as well. If you're forced into this condition, then you can envision that, okay, it depends on the possibilities. If the border will be open, you can see a mass influx of people outside going anywhere else. Some because there will be no prospects in the country, just to earn money. Others would escape repressions. They might have been involved in the military. They don't want to. They don't trust this situation. Or you can look at the left activists, that I don't know, LGBTQ activists, all this that are perceived by Putin as enemies. And if Russia will control Ukraine, that would be extremely problematic. And it would make Ukraine extremely vulnerable in any situation. For the right wing, of course, they are more militant. They can lead this discontent in a way because they are organized. They're more organized than anybody else, especially through their involvement in different military security structures. But also problematic if Ukraine is just taken over by the United States, because what Trump is trying to just grab all the resources he can, I don't know, reach, from nuclear power station to ports to the minerals. It is also poses a great political problem that we end up in discontent. And the situation is all these different ways of discontent making the country weaker in a way. It just begins to probe, like to give incentives to Putin to actually try again. If he's stopped now with maybe some of the territories that he controls, I can't really imagine how Ukraine can be forced to give him more territories that he can control right now, then he can claim them because Ukraine is weak. The government would fall. Or, I mean, if there are elections. So I say there's many problems, but it's not only problems for Ukraine. Like Ukraine, it's just one country, but it will concern all Europe. It will concern the whole world. If you're talking about refugees, well, they will be in your countries. And these are desperate people. I mean, like right now I have a job, but imagine I don't have this job. And I have responsibilities and I want to survive. I will take any job that they offer me. And who will benefit from this situation? They're illegal, not how we call it, not a big kind of criminal employers. That's the expression in Swedish. Basically, just trying to use you to undermine labor standards and make money on you, to exploit you. But also, there are plenty of criminal networks operating also in Sweden, and they would be happy to recruit someone to do the dirty job for them. So that's a big problem for your countries as well, in many ways. And then what would be the reaction of the society to this? The elections are coming. Who would they vote? They will vote right-wing in your countries, and then it will become a problem. Or talking about all the rest of the world, if you see how it is possible that you just do what you want, invade the country, and you just need to survive long enough, and then everyone would accept this. So it just opens the Pandora box all around the world, because there are always some unsatisfied, ambitious leaders and some old quarrels. So this won't be only Ukrainian problem in this situation.
Thank you. I want to ask, c'è bisogno che traduca la risposta dal pubblico o siete riusciti a seguire?
Meglio tradurre. Mi dicono meglio tradurre.
Ok, sarà un po' duro. Ok, Alexander, John, I'm gonna move to Italian to translate a bit of what you said. Allora, sarà un po' dura perché è una risposta bella, bella consistente. Intanto che è difficile parlare in generale di reazioni della società, in particolare da parte dei veterani e dei parenti dei veterani che compongono ora una fetta importante della società civile ucraina, perché non sappiamo ancora quali saranno le condizioni di questo tipo di pace, quanto costeranno, quale sarà il loro impatto. Ovviamente però sappiamo che una pace ingiusta sarebbe un problema grosso e un problema che, e probabilmente questo era quello che veniva implicato nella domanda, un problema che porterà insicurezza e instabilità in Ucraina. E, e in realtà non è soltanto qualcosa che, non stiamo parlando di un problema che si limiti alla società civile ucraina, è un problema che poi diventa un problema per tutta l'Europa. Dato che è un problema che impatterà le migrazioni, per esempio. Eh, Contando appunto che qualsiasi forma di controllo russo sull'Ucraina rappresenta un'erosione della sicurezza degli ucraini, che si tratti di persone LGBTQ, ma come si tratti di ex militari, come per chiunque sia stato coinvolto nel sistema di sicurezza ucraino. E in realtà, e qui continuiamo ad espandere sulla domanda iniziale, il problema non è soltanto per la parte russa della pace ingiusta, è anche per la parte americana. Quello che Trump sta cercando di ottenere da questo accordo di pace è accesso, controllo a quante più risorse possibili, dalle centrali nucleari ai porti, alle miniere. E questi sono problemi politici che poi creano malcontento. E tutte queste forme di malcontento rendono lo Stato più debole e creano un circolo vizioso. una resa, senza considerare che il tipo di resa che è stata descritta nella domanda dà anche un incentivo a Putin per fare altra guerra, perché a quanto pare la guerra dà accesso a queste risorse, dà accesso a questi territori. Infatti per Alexander è inimmaginabile, ad esempio, considerare le richieste per territori che non sono occupati, no? Putin ha parlato di Odessa, ha parlato di avere tutto il Donbass, che tuttora non è, tutta la regione dell'Europa orientale che tuttora non è riuscita a conquistare. E, e certo, e questa vulnerabilità dell'Ucraina in queste situazioni chiaramente può venire abusata dalla destra, in particolare proprio perché hanno più militanza, hanno più organizzazione. Però il malcontento in sé non ha colore. Quindi credo che quello che Alexander suggeriva è che se la destra riesce a cavalcare questo malcontento non è per una questione intrinseca, ma è per un fallimento delle sinistre. Un fallimento a cui personalmente credo chiosa partecipiamo collettivamente in Europa. E sto arrivando verso la fine, mi sto aiutando col transcript, sto arrivando verso la fine. Quindi sì, è che questo è di nuovo non è soltanto un problema ucraino. Immigrati disperati in tutta Europa verranno usati dalle destre di tutta Europa. Chi trae beneficio da queste situazioni sono populisti e oligarchi di tutti i tipi e di tutte le nazionalità. Quindi la situazione quindi questo è il tipo di reazione di cui si può parlare all'idea di una pace ingiusta, paura, instabilità e non solo in Ucraina, ma in tutto il mondo ci saranno leader ambiziosi capaci di sfruttare questo fallimento nel modo peggiore possibile. Ecco. Sorry, Alexander, Italian is not Italian is not really a language for summaries, and I'm not that good at them to start with.
So I didn't know you would translate everything. I wouldn't have spoken so long.
It's good. It's good. We are the transcript thing is actually working rather well. Abbiamo altre domande?
Allora, per Alexander, qual è il livello di collaborazione con i gruppi di sinistra dell'Europa del Nord? E appunto perché secondo lui è il migliore? E invece John, penso che la sinistra statunitense abbia avuto rispetto all'Ucraina gli stessi problemi che ha avuto quella italiana, però se adesso con l'amministrazione Trump, vedendo bene il sostegno del governo alla resistenza ucraina, se la sinistra americana sta cambiando atteggiamento oppure no.
Now I'll move on to the translation of the question. They are connected. I see how they are connected. So the question for Alexander, as was the collaboration with the left of Northern Europe was mentioned, and I guess it's quite a pressing issue for us. Is we get the impression from you, we gather the impression from you that this collaboration is functional. And it's functional also thanks to a different relationship that can be established with Northern Europe leftism than with Southern Europe leftism. And so we would like to know why do you think that's the case and whether this model can be exported somewhat. And for John, knowing that this limitation in leftist solidarity that we have seen in Southern Europe and in Central Europe, we know that has been seen also in the US. One of the infamous organization is called Pink, but that's just a little stain in a bigger stain that exists. And so we would like to know if now that that opposition to Ukrainian freedom is now being mediated by the American right, by the American far right, if the American left is somewhat repositioning itself in response to this pivoting. So yeah, now Alexander first, John second, and please ask me to clarify if something wasn't clear.
I'm thinking how to say it as short as possible so you don't have to translate everything. Well, the cooperation with the Northern European left was possible simply because there was someone to cooperate with. I happened to be a student in the North, so we were quite fast to establish this direct communication. What makes it possible is also a completely different situation with public opinion in these countries, which do not have any sympathy towards Russia and is quite supportive of international law. Just one of the things that I remember happening in Sweden, for example, that when the left party voted against providing weapons to Ukraine, like they did it once, and then initially because they said we can provide something else, but our party program is against supplying weapons to areas in conflict. They dropped in the polling 2%, and the party leader dropped 15% in the trust polling. Yeah, so that sometimes it can be just simple as that. But also, it was more visible probably in Finland, for example, where they had this history of being occupied, like still part of Finland is occupied by Russia, and it was a visible shift in the public opinion, even among the party members, because suddenly they didn't want to be alone in this situation, being under the threat of the attack, so they changed, and the public opinion within party members shifted in favor of joining NATO, not to be alone. And that was the response of the party leadership as well. They say we failed to address this seriously. There was no alternative. We didn't provide one. So how can we oppose joining NATO if there is nothing else? Then it's our common idea that maybe we can try to do it within the EU, not to be dependent on the US. And yeah, we can just go on and go on. But also the historical things, because all these countries, they were built on this concept of total defense, where everyone was somehow involved. And there was a sort of a social contract in the country where people were provided with a lot of welfare benefits, with a lot of tools to influence decision making, from tenants organizations to unions to pensioner organizations. Public education. There are so many tools. So that was how it used to be. Of course, it is destroying right now, but now it is a time to revert it and somehow perhaps expand this model to Ukraine, maybe even try to do it more a European common standard. And also they have money and means to support, which is also important right at the moment.
Right. Okay, so then before we move on with John, I'll try to summarize this.
Okay.
No, wait. I'll first, I guess it's better if first I translate this response and then we go on with yours. Otherwise, then it becomes no, sorry. Quindi, innanzitutto la cooperazione con la sinistra nordica è possibile intanto perché c'è qualcuno con cui collaborare e anche per il fatto che Alexander è fisicamente presente, lavora e studia in Uppsala, in Svezia. E secondariamente, questo probabilmente era più il fulcrum della tua domanda, e ciò che rende possibile è una situazione completamente diversa con l'opinione pubblica in questi paesi. Innanzitutto perché non hanno alcuna simpatia per la Russia e hanno mi sembra di aver capito anche proprio da un punto formativo, scolastico, una simpatia, un favore, una favore. Gli importa del diritto internazionale. E questo quindi ha immediatamente un impatto sull'opinione pubblica. Quando il partito di sinistra, quando quindi i quadri del partito hanno deciso di votare contro le forniture di armi all'Ucraina, possiamo fornire qualcos'altro, però siamo contro la guerra, quindi non possiamo dare armi alle zone in conflitto. Sono scesi immediatamente del 2% nei sondaggi come partito e i leader che hanno preso queste posizioni sono scesi del 15%. Quindi a volte può essere così semplice, è proprio un fatto della base che dà una direzione al partito. E poi c'è un altro aspetto che probabilmente, che magari era quello che avevi in mente tu, che è ancora più solido e di cui un grosso esempio è la Finlandia. Loro sono stati occupati dalla Russia. E quindi c'è un aspetto c'è un aspetto viscerale, sia umano, sia popolare che politico, all'idea la Russia sta facendo questa cosa di nuovo. E, e come affrontiamo questo problema? Mm, Come, come si affronta questo problema? Improvvisamente sia i partiti che l'opinione pubblica diventano favorevoli ad un'adesione alla NATO, non per una simpatia politica verso ciò che la NATO rappresenta, ma per il semplice fatto che non stanno venendo proposte alternative dall'Europa o dalle Nazioni Unite. Come possiamo ad opporci all'adesione alla NATO se l'unica forma di difesa dall'aggressione russa viene da lì? E, E questo però, se da una parte, dal riconoscere questa necessità che gli stessi finlandesi e svedesi non avrebbero voluto in primo luogo, allora a quel punto cresce la domanda eh, possiamo anche cercare un modo di fare questa resistenza all'interno dell'Unione Europea per non dipendere dagli Stati Uniti e questo di nuovo dà possibilità alla sinistra di non diventare una sinistra atlantista che diventa una contraddizione in termini. E, e bisogna però ricordare che, di nuovo, ci sono ragioni storiche, c'è un fatto che questi paesi del nord Europa e dell'est Europa sono stati costruiti su un concetto di difesa totale in cui tutti sono coinvolti nell'evitare una possibile occupazione russa. Quindi esiste un contratto sociale che in realtà ha dato alle popolazioni di quei paesi molti strumenti per influenzare i processi decisionali, organizzazioni, sindacati dal basso. E di nuovo qui si crea quel loop che è già stato menzionato e che a noi manca completamente, um, in cui l'idea di una difesa da un nemico comune viene accompagnata da delle istituzioni che sia rendono più facile la difesa, sia creano una partecipazione nella vita pubblica che trascende l'idea della difesa. E, e quindi, se questa è la fine, ora questo tipo di sistemi sta venendo distrutto, ma si può invertire questo trend e e uno degli sforzi che lui sta facendo è estendere questo tipo di modello all'Ucraina e magari provare a farlo di più con l'Europa e in Europa. E infine, ultima chiosa, ricordare che questi paesi nordici hanno soldi e mezzi per proporre questo supporto e che quindi purtroppo quello resta un fattore fondamentale. Questo era per Alexander. Now, John, sorry again, that took a while. Are you still on it? Do I need to reframe the question?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Now that Trump has come out in open support for Putin, you would think that some of the left here would reconsider their position. But we have to understand that the far right in the United States has always supported Putin. You had groups, some of them are just overtly fascist and racist groups like Turning Point and America First, that they supported the invasion of Ukraine have for years. You had a couple of years ago, I think it was 2023, a big protest in Washington, D.C., Rage Against the War Machine. And who was there was most of the prominent left, plus overt fascists. and they had no problem collaborating with each other. So the basis for this is that the overwhelming majority of the socialist movement in the United States is completely cut off from its own working class here. And if they don't have any connections in any real sense with the working class here, then there's no reason to expect that they would have with workers in Ukraine or anywhere else. And incidentally, that is directly related to their having capitulated to the union bureaucracy over the years. So what you see today, that same left that at the very best makes excuses for the invasion of Ukraine, that for all this time up until just recently, they were at the very best silent about Assad and Syria, or in most cases actually, they were apologists for Assad. Same thing with the struggle in Iran. So I think that the prospects that the socialist movement in the United States has crossed the Rubicon. It's evolved so far that it cannot evolve back again, and take a new path. And that the only hope for a healthy working class based socialist movement in the United States will be with a regeneration of a working class movement itself. And out of that can spring a healthy socialist movement that will take up real international working class solidarity support for Ukraine and so on. I hope that
Thank you.
answers the question.
I think it will. We are gonna verify. Allora, innanzitutto, sì, certo, ora che Trump ha espresso apertamente in realtà non è la prima volta, il suo sostegno e la sua simpatia per Putin, si potrebbe pensare che la sinistra americana possa riconsiderare la sua posizione, ma dobbiamo capire che l'estrema destra negli Stati Uniti ha sempre sostenuto Putin, non è una novità. C'erano gruppi, alcuni dei quali apertamente fascisti e razzisti, come Turning Point e America First, che hanno sostenuto in pratica l'invasione dell'Ucraina per anni. E nel 2023 c'è una grande protesta a Washington DC, questo simile, ma abbastanza simile a cosa è successo in Italia, Rage Against the War Machine, e chi c'era lì? C'erano molti personaggi di spicco della sinistra e c'erano espliciti fascisti, non nascosti. E non c'era stato un problema già allora nella collaborazione tra questi elementi. Quindi la base di questo problema è che la stragrande maggioranza del movimento socialista americano è completamente isolato dalla propria classe, dalla propria base operaia, dalla classe di lavoratori e da qualsiasi quindi forma di solidarietà. E nel momento in cui non hai legami con la tua propria classe operaia in America, che ragione hai, che modo c'è di aspettarsi che tu abbia, che ti preoccupi dei lavoratori in Ucraina o altrove? E quindi questo problema è quindi direttamente correlato con la capitolazione di queste dirigenze socialiste, dalla capitolazione della burocrazia sindacale che diventa una cruccia padronale. Quindi oggi quello che vediamo è sempre la solita arrampicata sugli specchi e lo stesso inventare di scuse. Lo vediamo per l'invasione dell'Ucraina, come lo abbiamo visto per tutti coloro che sono stati in silenzio o ancora peggio hanno ripetuto le bugie assadiste e la disinformazione sulla Siria. Gente che si dichiara di sinistra, ma che erano poi apologeti di Assad, apologeti di una dittatura sanguinaria. Di nuovo un parallelismo ovvio. E non è un caso, questo lo aggiungo io, che le reti di disinformazione siano le stesse. E questo è anche di nuovo il caso con la solidarietà alla lotta femminista in Iran. Quindi, come dire, le prospettive del movimento socialista negli Stati Uniti hanno tratto il loro dado, no? Hanno attraversato il Rubicone. non possono tornare indietro le dirigenze, non possono prendere un nuovo percorso. L'unica speranza per un movimento socialista sano, basato sulla classe operaia negli Stati Uniti, risiede nella rigenerazione del movimento operaio stesso, risiede nel movimento dal basso e risiede da una primavera, insomma, una primavera operaia. E per questo è importante quello che facciamo noi, un sostegno di solidarietà internazionale per la classe operaia a partire dall'Ucraina e nel mondo. E questo è. Quindi, so I would say that you did reply quite extensively. Do we have other questions? Do we want to follow up on any of these topics? I have a list of questions. I also don't want to keep anybody forever. Both Anna and Julia had hard limits. I guess that John, by having woke up at 5 a.m., is probably available for a longer time because of the investment that he had to do in the first place. Alexander, I don't know what's your time availability, but we have another question coming. Hai il microfono.
Alessandro, c'è tempo per fare un intervento? Ancora da qua? Una domanda.
Ah, una domanda, certo, un intervento. Certo.
This is a question for the organizers, and this is a very interesting discussion, even on the parts that talk about, I think they are hearing me, that talk about the balance between military aid to Ukraine and not cutting the social security in Europe, and it's like a cycle within itself. But have the organizers ever tried to invite politicians? I mean, people who are not already on our positions on this kind of talks and events, like party leaders from Italy. Has such kind of invite ever been extended? Avete mai invitato dei politici a partecipare a questi call? Perché se invece diciamo tra noi.
Non c'è l'audio.
Okay. Okay, I caught most of the question. I actually had some trouble. Alexander, John, do you need a summary of sort, or could you catch it? Because the microphone was not working so well. Ok, allora guarda, c'è un problema col microfono. Intanto grazie per averla fatta in inglese, apprezzo molto. Però aspetta, se riesci a ridirmela in italiano, una versione Redux, così gliela ripropongo. Cioè, invitare politici in che contesto esattamente? In che dibattito?
In realtà adesso mi ha spiegato che no, noi la domanda ce la facevamo noi come collettivo di Sinistra per Ucraina. Come mai non invitiamo politici a iniziative come questa?
Okay, so the question is for us, Sinistra per... okay, so sorry Alexander and John, but I guess you'll be able to express an opinion about this. Papo, vuoi dire qualcosa tu? Dico qualcosa io? Dice qualcosa Maria Elena?
No, a me viene venuto spontaneo a dire che non abbiamo sotto mano tanti politici utili a questa cosa. Comunque rispondi tu dall'estero. Vai tu, Alessandro.
Ok, allora, intanto una risposta molto breve da parte mia. Come ha detto Pappo, quali politici invitare? Sappiamo che in Italia il lavoro del politico non è in particolare quelli che hanno importanza parlamentare, non correrebbero mai il rischio di venire ad un evento del genere in cui magari qualche matto dice qualcosa sulla Palestina, per esempio. Quindi intanto questo è il primo problema della politica parlamentare. La politica extraparlamentare, sappiamo lo schifo che ha fatto negli ultimi anni, quindi è un po' difficile prenderli come interlocutori o trovare un linguaggio con cui arrivarci noi in primo luogo. Hai ragione però nel dire che un qualche tipo di coinvolgimento della politica è necessario. Um, eh, Personalmente spero che questo, in sostanza, perché noi come Sinistra per l'Ucraina, a parte il fatto che non siamo un movimento politico in primo luogo, siamo un ripetitore, diciamo. Però ora con questo tipo di eventi stiamo cercando di creare delle piattaforme di dialogo che hanno un significato politico. Nel momento in cui iniziamo ad avere una base, e con base parlo delle persone che ci stanno ascoltando e che intervengono e che partecipano, che da una parte condivide quei principi di socialismo, di uguaglianza, di resistenza, di antifascismo che ci contraddistinguono come sinistra italiana, ma che dall'altra è disposta ad accettare un dialogo con le uniche forze che possono diventare interlocutori a questo punto per quello che riguarda le politiche europee, quindi forze che sono nel Parlamento europeo. Si tratta purtroppo di parlare col Partito Democratico. Noi come Sinistra Democratica, se avessimo invitato il Partito Democratico a questo evento, non so quanti delle persone che adesso ci danno fiducia continuerebbero a darci fiducia per ovvie ragioni che conosci. Però si cresce, ci si sviluppa. Stiamo mettendo, con questi dialoghi mettiamo dei paletti che permettono poi, credo, anche questo tipo di compromessi che permettono di comunicare con la sinistra istituzionale. E ora girerò ora la domanda che hai fatto in una versione un po' modificata a Alexander e John, o almeno ci provo. In sostanza per chiedere la loro opinione sull'interazione tra realtà come quella che noi rappresentiamo di sinistra non istituzionale e come possono comunicare con la sinistra istituzionale per i temi importanti come lo riarmo e il bisogno di creare un riarmo, di creare una politica di difesa europea che non si basi sulla distruzione del welfare. Ok, so Alexander, John, sorry that took a bit of a convoluted turn. But there is something that I think we would like both your inputs. So the initial question was basically to us as Sinistra per l'Ukraina, why we don't invite politicians. If we are talking about political issues, policy issues, such as the need for European defense and the need for this European defense to not slash welfare, social programs, etc. And the only answer I could come up with here on the run was that we don't represent the institutional left. I mean, we basically don't represent anybody because we are not elected, but we are not the network we are part of is non-institutional left, and non-institutional left has a big problem with the legitimate, and it's a right problem to have with the legitimacy of what passes for an institutional left. We have the Democratic Party, which is basically a center left party. We have more leftist parties in the European Parliament, which have had debatable that have very debatable positions for what concerns Ukraine and defense. I guess to an event such as this, we should have invited Carola Rackete, for instance. That could be a starting point. But anyway, what I wanted to ask you was, can you relate to this kind of issue? Are there solutions that you have seen in theory or in practice? How does platform such as ours, which includes some controversial issues, such as the support for Palestine or the support for Syria, etc. How do you have suggestions on how to relate with institutions?
That's not so difficult, I think, in the north, where you can just invite politicians and they have sensible position. But I mean, to me, the main thing is to present a credible alternative. That's the main thing, and unite through it. Or if there are any networks you can use to mobilize and, I don't know, question some of these things, just using them, because that's why we were involved in the discussion with the Force International. We know many people who are in good positions already, but the network in general, it was hard to guess where they belong, because there was the one position that is represents majority, and there are a lot of people who come up with crazy ideas. Even I remember during the Congress of the Force International, it was me and a representative from Russia, a comrade from Russian Socialist Movement. We were talking, but the opposition, particularly from Spain, I think Spain, Greece, a little bit of Germany, all these pacifist countries, they were not listening at all. They were just coming up with same old bullshit. I'm sorry for the words, but also in all their alternative resolutions, they were calling to support unions. They were calling to support NGOs. They were calling to support our own organization that we were representing, yet they failed to try to listen to us. So, but in the end, we won the majority. So it was adopted, this revolution. It will be translated, it will be spread through this network. Maybe there are other networks existing in your country. So while politicians might not be good at this the moment, but politicians, they react to the public demand. So maybe you can build through the unions, through some other networks. And I know that there are, like Carola Racketa, for example, there are sensible politicians in the European Parliament which are trying to create a new European left alliance, which is now more like a very, at the beginning, more like a way how to get money and spend them on good things from the European Commission. But they will be discussing also with the Italian left, the Sinistra Italiana, I think, was their name. And of course, that's one of the things they disagree, but the idea is to have at least as observers Ukrainian left or Lithuanian left there, those who can present these positions and also influence in one way or another what is the discussion. So trying to use all channels, I guess.
Thank you. John?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends in part on what you're trying to accomplish, you know. And if you want to have like a big public event where you're going to attract hundreds or thousands of people, that's one thing. But if you're organizing, if you have a conference in order for the group itself to get organized, it seems to me that's a different, somewhat different purpose. And in the United States, of course, we have a unique situation in that there is not and never has been a working class party, which means there's never been a real left that is really hardly ever, not since like the 1920s, that has had elected politicians. But if we did have somebody that's really that's independent of the capitalist parties, that bases themselves on the working class, that was in full support of Ukraine and so on, and we were going to organize a conference like this, I'm sure you invite them because they're kind of one of our comrades. But that's how it seems to me anyway.
Okay, thank you. I'll go on to translate. Devo prima trovare l'inizio del transcript. Ecco qui. Allora, Alexander faceva notare che innanzitutto nel suo caso in Nord Europa non è così complicato come può esserlo per noi trovare degli interlocutori politici. E per lui la cosa fondamentale è individuare innanzitutto le reti, magari non partitiche, ma di iniziative, di movimenti che permettono poi di mobilitare forze politiche. E e presentare all'interno di queste reti un'alternativa credibile a chi ha poi posizioni, come dire, conflittuali sul tema, perché no, non c'è nessun bisogno di proteggere l'Europa da niente, l'Europa non ci piace, la guerra comunque non esiste, perché è un tipo di posizione che si vede a sinistra. E, ora, lui fa l'esempio pratico del fatto che quando è iniziato ad esserci, loro sono stati coinvolti nel dibattito. Did you say the Fourth International?
Yes.
Yeah,
Well,
ok, quindi loro sono stati coinvolti nel dibattito, questo proprio all'inizio dell'invasione con la Quarta Internazionale, quindi movimenti trotskisti, in cui era già in contatto con persone che avevano posizioni, come dire, sensate, ma non aveva sicurezze, per quello che riguardava la rete in generale. E, E quindi e loro parlavano all'interno dei dibattiti di questo movimento, e l'opposizione, in particolare quella spagnola ehm, e altre del sud Europa, non ascoltavano affatto e continuavano soltanto a ripetere le solite vecchie boiate propagandistiche, e sto un po' censurando nel dire boiate, vorrei dire altro. Um, ci, Parlando di risoluzioni alternative al conflitto, sindacati, organizzazioni non governative, eh, che sono poi il tipo di soluzioni di cui anche noi abbiamo parlato, ma non c'era nessun tipo di ascolto da parte di queste forze. Ciononostante, alla fine, all'interno di questa rete, pure nel confronto con queste forme di campismo, loro hanno ottenuto una maggioranza. Il documento che è stato emanato era quello che parlava di solidarietà, che parlava di resistenza contro l'invasione russa. E quindi è importante per noi, allora, identificare queste reti nel nostro paese, nel nostro ambiente, nella nostra parte di Europa, diciamo. E che in effetti è qualcosa che abbiamo cercato di fare, e che proprio grazie a questo tipo di eventi e questo tipo di partecipazione possiamo cercare di fare ulteriormente. E quindi sì, dice che ad esempio l'esempio di Carola Rackete è un buon esempio di un politico connesso alle nostre forze di riferimento che è nel Parlamento europeo e che cerca di creare una nuova alleanza nella sinistra europea. È anche un modo per poi ottenere più denaro e per spenderlo in cose buone, no? Nel tipo di welfare che vogliamo a sinistra, eccetera, eccetera, dalla Comunione Europea. Um, e quindi questo tipo di discussioni possiamo averle anche in Italia, e il fatto di portare interlocutori, osservatori dalla sinistra ucraina è in sé per sé intrinsecamente positivo. L'importante è cercare di identificare e utilizzare più canali possibile. E John poi ha aggiunto ehm, il fatto che per entrare in un dibattito eh, che per organizzare un dibattito che permetta di raggiungere i numeri di persone, che sono poi i numeri di persone che interessano un politico, un politico entra in un dibattito perché c'è il potenziale, perché c'è un potenziale di massa, c'è un potenziale politico. E quindi per arrivare lì, innanzitutto devi avere un'organizzazione di partenza ehm, che può essere la direzione in cui stiamo andando noi, e che invece nel caso degli Stati Uniti non esiste questa situazione, perché non esiste non c'è più, e forse non c'è mai stata, una vera sinistra. Ehm, e che quindi non esiste proprio il problema di troviamo un interlocutore che ha potere, perché chi ha potere è completamente dipendente dalle corporazioni e dai partiti capitalisti. E che quindi che quindi mi sembra, se ho capito bene, nel caso eh, degli Stati Uniti questo tipo di rappresentanza, questo tipo di interlocutore non esiste, ma che l'unico modo quindi di interloquire con la classe operaia americana non sarà attraverso i politici, ma sarà attraverso i rappresentanti di movimenti di solidarietà dal basso e simili. Questo è il mio riassunto della domanda. Ci sono altre domande? So then I would like to... Allora farei un'ultima domanda io, per poi salutarvi. So, we thought of closing with one last question. And I'll first say it in Italian so people know what I'm talking about. Sappiamo tutti come uno dei... Aspettate, che sto cercando, eccolo qua. Sappiamo tutti come uno dei cardini della propaganda russa diretta verso la sinistra italiana è stata il Donbass e una rete parecchio radicata che include diverse formazioni di sinistra, inserita nella rete dei comunisti, con membri ed esponenti come la banda Bassotti, che in Italia fin dal 2014 ha giurato e spergiurato su un Donbass socialista sotto attacco da parte ucraina, e questo con raccolte fondi, con aberrazioni come raccolte fondi che vendevano nastri di San Giorgio a festival di sinistra a Bologna per raccogliere fondi per lo sforzo bellico russo, in pratica. E questo è una sorta di trucco nero che la Russia è riuscita ad utilizzare, come si dice, sfruttando reti di disinformazione preesistenti e soprattutto l'incendio della casa dei sindacati in Odessa. Oggi ho l'impressione che molte di queste reti abbiano cambiato il proprio tipo di messaggi e si siano sostanzialmente russificate. L'idea dell'utopia socialista ucraino-russofona non esiste più. Cioè, nonostante eh, nonostante esiste ancora si è parlato molto di indipendentismo, si è parlato molto di russofoni e, e vorrei sapere questo tipo di narrative, come è cambiato in Ucraina, se erano coscienti di questo tipo di strumentalizzazione e questo popolo in parte usato tra diaspora e chi è rimasto al fronte, come sta sopravvivendo alla guerra. So this is mostly for Alexander. It has an aspect also for John, and it's about Donbass. So in Italy, the fulcrum of the Russian propaganda addressing the left was based on a well-radicated network that in Italy, since 2013, was swearing on a socialist Donbass that would have been under attack by Ukrainian forces. And this came to points like in 2022, with the invasion well underway, with fundraisers selling St. George ribbons at leftist festivals in northern Italy to support basically the Russian war effort under the guise of humanitarian Donbass support. And this was a dark hat trick that Russia pulled, mostly exploiting pre-existing disinformation network and the black legend that they built around the 2nd of May in Odessa. Now, today in Italy, most of these networks switched messaging. They're not talking about a socialist reality anymore. They're mostly talking about Russian reconstruction and the Russian dream in eastern Ukraine. which is, I mean, as horrible and as almost hallucinogenic, but it's what they're doing. Now, first of all, we know, and we are tired of debating, and this is not what we are asking about. We know that this narrative is false. We know, however, that this narrative is based, first of all, on Russian manipulation, Russian mercenary activity in Eastern Ukraine, but also in a minority that Anna described in her 2015 article, in a minority of Donbas people divided between nostalgia for the past and mistrust toward corrupted institutions. Corrupted institution at a local level that also managed to turn this distrust into distrust for the state. But now that region is the front lines. A lot of that base has been sent to the front line and died there. So I would like to know from if you do want to talk about it. I also accept let's just move on from that. But what is happening now with this? With these narratives in Ukraine? Is there any sort of is there just an iron curtain where the front line are? Who is still there? Who didn't? There is for sure a diaspora. What is the diaspora saying? What is going on that you are willing to talk about? And for John, basically, if this let's say, propaganda effort that I talked about, if it's something that, based on this topic specifically, if it's something that you have seen also in the US, or if it is an Italian exceptionalism.
Yeah, so that's the question. Well, I mean, to begin with, like I've noticed the strange thing, and quite often people don't even spell the name Donbas right. I don't know, maybe just pronunciation differences. But what is most important, I don't even understand what it is, because it's a geological term. Donetsk coal basing, and it doesn't fit any administrative territory, because even if we are talking about Donetsk or Luhansk Oblast, first of all, they were never fully controlled by Russia to begin with, but also not all of their boundaries they correspond with Donbass purpose, because some parts of Donbass they're not occupied. And some parts of non-Donbass are, because there is Slabozhanщина, well, okay, like different region names in the north, in the south of this region. And Donbass is just something around this coal basing. Yeah, but it's not probably the most important there. Like, it's quite often these are weird narratives misused, but what you should understand as well, that huge part of it was not occupied. People lived there before the war. Mariupol was not occupied. People lived there. And I don't want to say that things are bright in Ukraine. There are a lot of problematic things with the discussion politically in Ukraine. As one of them I was mentioning, that just was this Russian propaganda using people for that purpose. It also alienates these people somehow from the Ukrainian population, because they say, because of you it happened, because Putin says he's protecting you. And there is a whole set of problems connected to it. But there was no, there was peaceful life in Mariupol. So it's a super false narrative, because what Russian troops came, they destroyed cities. They were killing the same people that they were claiming they would protect. They were destroying their houses. And in those independent republics, they were sending those people as cannon fodder in front of their own troops, without preparation, without ammunition, without anything. Again, just saying how much it is just used. And there was a Communist Party of Ukraine that their branches, or like some of their branches in these areas, they welcomed it because they also like, wow, maybe it's our chance to, build on the workers' legacy. Well, they were banned in those regions. Their convention, pre-election convention, was bombed, and eventually they were banned from participating in the elections, and all their representatives were purged. So, and again, there is nothing there connected to the reality. But also, it's still just very absurd to imagine that one country's invasion is somehow compensating for the shortcomings of other internal policies. Because, I mean, there is this anti-authoritarian left tradition, for example, and there was the Stalinist Soviet Union was invaded by Germany. But would anyone in their sane mind would say, well, Stalinist Soviet Union is bad, so Germany is liberating people? Even though that was basically the propaganda by the diaspora organization of many of the Soviet countries. That was the official propaganda of the Nazi Germany when they came there. They didn't talk about, I don't know, murdering people. They say we would liberate. But no one would buy it. So why are you thinking that the fascist, authoritarian, neoliberal Russia is bringing something good to people that they're exploiting? And this is what is happening right now, right? Like what is happening in the last days, that they are forcing people to take up passports officially. They say if you don't take passport, you have to move out of this territory. There were a lot of problems is also trying to get the properties of people away from them. There are huge schemes happening with this mafia in these areas. And we are in touch, of course. There is internet still, at least. So, I'm from that area. Anna is from that area. We know what is happening. Nothing positive is happening. And also, like, when there is a frontline war happening, Ukraine is trying to evacuate cities. Well, probably we failed in Mariupol, but that was just in the beginning of the war. Nothing was expected. Now cities are being evacuated. Donetsk being on the front line for how many years? It was used as a logistical center, as a military center. So of course, the world is like cannon duels. No one ever raised the question that they should evacuate people and offer them something. It was just like a brief thing that happened before the war started, and again, like evacuated several hundreds people and just left them in the forest. Before, nothing was happening. So it is so fake. It just people are not even trying to understand, I guess, what is happening there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know it's a terrifying topic. Yeah. Sorry. John, is this something that is this an issue you also had faced in communication among American leftists?
Prior to 2022, when the war was going on in Luhansk and Donetsk, there was discussion about that and self-determination and blah blah this and that. Nowadays, it's not discussed hardly at all. One thing that is still raised is, in 2014 there was a right-wing coup organized by the CIA. That you still hear that, but the other not really, no. Amongst the left, amongst the wider working class, they wouldn't even know where Donbass is. They would have never even heard of Donbass.
Okay, thank you. So I will translate your responses, and then I guess we'll interrupt the Zoom. Hopefully the conversation will go on in the live. Allora, Alexander fa notare innanzitutto una cosa strana, che spesso le persone non scrivono neanche correttamente il nome della regione di cui si parla, e soprattutto non capiscono di cosa stanno parlando, non capiscono che è un termine geologico, il bacino del Don. E, non è un territorio amministrativo, si riferisce a multipli territori amministrativi come quelli che fanno capo a Donetsk o Luhansk. E questi posti, peraltro, che sono stati presentati come russificati, non sono mai stati completamente controllati eh, dalla, dalla Russia. E, e la gente viveva lì prima e dopo la guerra. Già nel 2014 Mariupol non era occupata, c'erano moltissime regioni che non erano occupate, in cui la vita andava avanti, in cui questo popolo aveva la propria libertà. E, e il fatto che queste persone siano state usate in questo modo dalla propaganda russa è una cosa che innanzitutto ha distrutto la vita di quelle stesse persone che poi si sono trovate alienate dal resto dell'Ucraina, perché poi si stabilisce una narrativa di segno opposto che dice è colpa vostra. Questi crimini stanno venendo commessi da una persona che dice di volervi proteggere, che vi usa. Ma questo, e non c'era niente di tutto questo nella mia vita, nella sua vita di Alexander, prima dell'intervento russo. E quindi stiamo parlando di qualcosa che è successo quando queste truppe, fin dal 2014, sono venute a distruggere le città, ad uccidere le persone che hanno poi detto e che dicono di voler proteggere, distruggere le loro case. E queste repubbliche indipendenti, i civili di queste repubbliche indipendenti, sono state usate come carne da cannone, mentre la nostra sinistra applaudiva e diceva qualcuno pensi al Donbass, loro venivano mandati letteralmente come carne da cannone, senza armi, cioè senza munizioni, con armi, senza protezioni. E il partito comunista ucraino, che secondo il delirio nostrano avrebbe in qualche modo dovuto prosperare sotto l'occupazione russa, è stato bandito. La loro convention preelettorale ci hanno messo delle bombe ed è stato vietato a tutti i loro rappresentanti di partecipare alle elezioni. Quindi di nuovo la cosa che ho menzionato era la visione che ho menzionato, di cui purtroppo toccava parlare in Italia e tocca qua e là parlarne ancora, è completamente immaginaria e fabbricata. E, ed è completamente assurdo immaginare che l'invasione di un paese in qualche modo possa compensare le scarse possibilità offerte dalle politiche interne. È come dire che secondo questa visione, allora, essendo che l'Unione Sovietica stalinista opprimeva i popoli eh, in Ucraina o nella Polonia anteriore, allora si dovrebbe dare il benvenuto all'invasione nazista. Non è qualcosa che una persona in- che non è una cosa che si dovrebbe neanche poter dire, poter concepire. Ehm, e quindi, in sostanza ha espresso la stessa mia frustrazione nel com'è possibile che quello che stiamo vedendo venga in qualche modo presentato in una luce positiva. Ci sono persone costrette a prendere il passaporto russo ufficialmente, se non lo prendi te ne devi andare. Ehm, Ci sono stati problemi infiniti nel tentativo, ci sono stati grandi tentativi, scusate, c'è il problema dei grossi tentativi fatti per rubare dalle persone in quelle aree. Ci sono, e tra l'altro tutto questo non sta avvenendo nell'oscurità, c'è internet, loro sanno, conoscono le persone, conoscono le vittime di questo ladroncinio su larga scala. E, E certo ci sono stati fallimenti enormi da parte ucraina, fallimenti ad esempio nei tentativi di evacuare queste zone prima che venissero evacuate, come è successo a Mariupol. Lì c'è un fatto di sorpresa. Quindi in buona sostanza, thank you. Quindi in buona sostanza è difficile, è chiaro che certe persone non provano neanche a capire cosa succede. E adesso, before I move on to John, Alexander, thank you for this reply. I think it's very important. It was very important to repeat the things you said. What I wanted, and what you also replied to, was the last part about what's going on now. I think it's a good reminder, everything else, but I also think that among us, among leftists, this have to even stop being like we can't even give the time of the day, but we have to identify people that say that as enemies and treat them accordingly. Following up to that, John mentioned the fact that these topics were briefly relevant at the very start of...
You're speaking in English.
Ah, scusami. John ha menzionato che questi argomenti erano rilevanti all'inizio, soprattutto prima del 2022, tra 2014 e 2022, assieme a tutto il resto della spazzatura sul colpo di Stato della CIA, eccetera. Ma non è qualcosa che ha mai fatto parte della conversazione per la classe operaia in generale. È sempre stato un argomento per, come si dice, qual è la parola italiana? Non per pupazzi, per gente manovrata, per gente che occupa spazi, non per gente che ha contatto con istanze popolari, perché ovviamente la classe operaia americana a malapena sa cosa sia il Donbass. Ok, su queste note, thank you so much, John, thank you so much, Alexander, and thank you to the networks that you refer to. Alexander, please convey again our gratitude to Hannah and to Julia. I have been reading the works of all of you since pretty much the start of the invasion. And so I think that talking with you today was a privilege. And what's worst is a privilege that you have been paying for. So I think I'm talking for all the collective when I say thank you from the depth of our heart. And I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you very
John,
much.
you're muted.
Thank you for organizing this, for translating, and I can't underline how much I admire all people who managed to sit through this extremely long panel. Thank you everyone for your support.
Thanks very much to everybody for organizing this. And I hope this will only be the first in a process of our really collaborating and working together in the future.